America sanctioned Iran in 1979. 45 years later, the Islamic Republic is still standing. America placed a comprehensive embargo on Cuba in 1962. 3 generations later, the communist government remains in power. In 2022, Russia was hit with a financial campaign of unprecedented scale, yet their economy actually grew the following year. Meanwhile, North Korea spent decades under maximum international pressure and successfully built an estimated 50-plus nuclear warhead arsenal. This has become the default tool of non-military force for the Western world. It is used repeatedly and with total confidence. Yet across decades and continents, it consistently produces the same result. The target government stays exactly where it is. If a cornerstone of foreign policy reliably fails to unseat its targets, we have to ask why the international community refuses to honestly evaluate it. To understand why they fail, we need to look at what economic penalties actually are. A sanction is a restriction where one country cuts off another from its resources, freezing central bank assets, blocking financial transactions, or banning trade. They generally fall into 3 tiers. You have targeted sanctions, which freeze the personal bank accounts of specific individuals or oligarchs. Then there are sectoral sanctions, which block entire industries like oil or technology. Finally, there are comprehensive sanctions, which attempt near-total economic isolation. This shows the foundational theory behind these restrictions. Imposing severe economic pain will inevitably create intense political pressure inside the target country. Make life hard enough for a government, and that internal pressure will eventually force the leadership to alter their behavior. Because sending in the military is simply too costly and dangerous, Western nations trust this formula by default. They rely on it, even when reality constantly breaks the equation. Let's look at the actual data. Over 45 years of financial isolation, Iran didn't abandon its nuclear ambitions. Instead, they advanced their program to the point where they now have enough enriched uranium to build multiple warheads. In 2022, Western nations froze $300 billion of Russian central bank assets. But in 2023, Russia's GDP grew by 3.6%. Despite being cut off from Western technology and global markets, Russia is currently producing more artillery shells per year than the entire NATO alliance combined. Over in North Korea, an isolated nation went from having 0 nuclear capabilities to building an arsenal of up to 60 nuclear warheads, plus intercontinental ballistic missiles, all developed exclusively under severe international pressure. And in Cuba, 6 decades of an embargo successfully impoverished ordinary citizens, but it completely failed to dislodge the communist leadership. Across all these major case studies, the policies certainly inflicted economic damage. It hurt regular people. But the primary goal, changing the target government's strategic political behavior, failed completely. There are 5 structural reasons why authoritarian regimes survive economic warfare. First, dictators control resource distribution. When the economy shrinks, they ensure the pain is absorbed by ordinary citizens, protecting the military and political elites who actually keep them in power. Second, regimes weaponize the penalty. They point to Western financial pressure as proof of foreign aggression, using it to write their own nationalistic propaganda and justify domestic crackdowns. Third, the global market is simply too complex to police entirely. The moment a restriction is placed, a shadow economy of workarounds emerges. Target countries just find new middlemen to bypass the rules. Fourth, economic interdependence creates fatal contradictions. Sanctioning nations often quietly rely on the target country for energy resources or regional stability, meaning they leave deliberate loopholes in their own penalties. Finally, time works against the blockade. When a country can no longer import what it needs, it adapts. It builds permanent domestic self-sufficiency in finance and arms production. The theoretical chain reaction of pain leading to political change snaps. Authoritarian regimes possess internal defense mechanisms and global market alternatives that the standard model completely ignores. This tool isn't universally useless. International pressure did contribute to the dismantling of apartheid in South Africa, and it helped convince Libya to voluntarily give up its weapons of mass destruction program in 2003. But those successes relied on 3 highly specific conditions. The target country couldn't find alternative markets. The ruling elite felt the financial pain directly, and the sanctioning countries offered a specific, achievable off-ramp for the target to take. Today, none of those conditions exist for major targets. They possess massive alternative markets and highly shielded elites. Deploying sanctions against them is applying an outdated tool to an immune target. We can see this shift clearly by looking at India. After conducting nuclear tests in 1998, India was hit with significant penalties from the United States. Instead of bowing to the pressure, India simply absorbed the hit and continued its program. Within a few years, the West quietly backed down. That defiance continued in 2022. When the West tried to embargo Russian energy, India refused to participate. They purchased massive amounts of discounted Russian oil, saving $10 billion and proving how limited Western financial power is when a major economy chooses not to participate. India's position highlights a core grievance shared across the global South. They view these penalties not as a neutral enforcement of international law, but as a selectively applied weapon, one that ignores violations committed by Western allies. The era where Western nations could unilaterally isolate a country is over. Today, these policies endure primarily as a political illusion. They allow powerful nations to look incredibly busy on the world stage, while continually failing to stop actual atrocities, and ultimately entrenching a deeply